The holiday season is an amazing time of year full of joy, unity, and my favorite part, holiday cartoon specials. Who doesn't love a good Christmas episode? So many of our favorite shows would approach the holiday season from a different angle, but ultimately all would reach the same goal of invoking those positive, warm and fuzzy holiday feelings. I gotta say though, there isn't really any other show that would approach a Christmas episode quite like Courage the Cowardly Dog did. I mean, in general, Courage the Cowardly Dog was so incredibly different from every other cartoon on the air in the late 90s and early 2000s. In an era that had so much character and individuality, Courage was a unique touchstone for how to stand out from the crowd. On that note, of course, when it came to approaching a Christmas episode, it would do so in a way that no other cartoon on TV had done before, or would ever do again. What's really crazy about it though is the fact that some people might not even view this one as a Christmas episode because it wasn't as on the nose as most Christmas episodes are. As a matter of fact, I'd go as far as saying there's a good chance that a ton of you might not even remember this one being a Christmas episode. And that's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're gonna deep dive into Courage the Cowardly Dog's really weird Christmas episode. Before I dive into it though, I just wanted to say, hey, thank you so much for being here. I hope your holiday season has been amazing, and I truly appreciate you for clicking on this video. If you're new here, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future nostalgic walks down memory lane. Also, I recently launched YouTube memberships, so if you'd like access to videos early, as well as some other sweet perks, please consider becoming a member today. With that being said, let's get right onto the video. Today, my friends, we're checking out none other than the Season 4 episode, The Nutcracker. This episode starts out at LaSalle's junkyard, which is overflowing with garbage and scrap as far as the eye can see. Inside the yard, we see Muriel and Eustace perusing as they partake in what they call free shopping. Nearby, Courage celebrates, surrounded by more old shoes than he could ever chew up. The family stumble upon all sorts of fantastic odds and ends, however, they seem to be rather hit or miss, tending to fall to dust or just not make much sense.
Oh, can't wait to go home and blow me a hole-in-one. Huh? Ow!
After a while, Eustace comes upon an old antique nutcracker, but he sees it as a piece of junk and just tosses it behind him as it hits Courage in the head. He holds it in his paws, getting a good look at it before it starts to freak him out a bit, and he drops it, hiding behind Muriel.
Oh, Courage, it's just a wee nutcracker. Look how it works.
Over in Eustace's neck of the woods, we see him pulling on a rope that's attached to a large moose head. It comes tumbling down from atop a large pile of waste, and it lands right on his head, almost as if it were a mask. As that's happening, we see Courage enjoying a nice tea party with his nutcracker and some other toys, one of which is very familiar, before a large garbage truck approaches and just covers him with garbage. As it drives away, the gates close behind it, locking Courage and his family in the landfill. Courage runs to tell Muriel, but she doesn't really seem to mind as she's a little preoccupied playing dress up. He then runs over to Eustace, still stuck in the moose's head, and it goes right about how you'd imagine it would. The sun begins to set, and we see the family making the best of their situation here at the dump. We see Muriel making a tent of sorts while peering eyes watch over her. Meanwhile,
Great reception. Oh.
Courage looks over to see Muriel tugging on a rat's tail, likely not realizing that's what she's doing, before she gets distracted by a pan. When she walks away, Courage catches sight of the big, mean-looking rat. Before he knows it, Eustace has already been captured by the rat, and they're onto Muriel already. Courage saves her from a rat hiding in a fridge, but as he runs away, another rat comes to help out his friend that Courage shut in the fridge, and the two give chase.
Oh my.
Courage runs away, but he ends up trapped when one of the rats puts out a giant spring-loaded mousetrap, and the other is coming from the direction behind him. Thinking in a quick pinch, Courage pulls out the nutcracker and he throws it at the giant mousetrap, causing it to trigger and allowing him to walk by safely. Thankfully, the nutcracker isn't damaged in the process. Courage keeps going until... This rat throws a full-blown car down at Courage and just barely misses him, and somehow the rat ends up in the trunk of the same exact car that he tossed down. As Courage runs off, he reaches a dead end, trapped against a fence. He decides to pull out the nutcracker and he attempts to use it as a shovel, digging a hole in the ground with hopes of tunneling under the fence. As Courage continues to run and the rats follow, dancing to this classical score, Courage feels more and more helpless, and they just won't give up with the maniacal chase dancing. After all sorts of chase hijinks, the two rats split up and they play it strategically, continuing to come at Courage from every angle possible. Eventually, they tire him out and he has to catch his breath. Courage goes into detective mode, trying to catch Muriel's scent. He goes around the whole dump searching, but he comes up short until he hears the sound of Eustace and Muriel shouting over a large wall of garbage in front of him. Courage ends up using his new friend, the Nutcracker, to assist him. Courage panics and he ends up deciding that he has to jump into action. He scales the wall of garbage and he jumps down onto the table, Shane McMahon style, splitting it right in half. One of the chairs at the table hits a gramophone nearby, causing the classical score that's accompanied this entire sequence to come to a grinding halt.
Ah, Courage, I knew you'd save me.
The rats continue to dance around Courage until they come together as one and begin spinning. They twirl faster and faster as their tails whip outward, mimicking the force of a weed whacker. Their tails smack Courage and they send him and his nutcracker flying. Courage lands in some nearby garbage, meanwhile the nutcracker lands in the Eustace and Muriel soup.
Stupid dog!
Courage continues to dance and boogie down as the rats get more and more scared, clearly feeling bested by his moves. Courage dances around with the Nutcracker, who easily unties Eustace and Muriel, flies through the air, and even destroys the entire den of the rats with the help of Courage. By the end of it, Muriel and Courage are celebrating as he takes a bow with the Nutcracker.
Give me that thing!
Eustace stands there with his uncracked nut and the Nutcracker, which he claims is garbage. As Muriel explains that you aren't really supposed to use it and that it's more for looks, Eustace tosses it aside, discarding it like it's trash. This, to me, is such a weird one to look at as a Christmas episode. So many other Christmas episodes rely on wrapped presents, brightly decorated Christmas trees, and a generally snowy atmosphere to capture that holiday charm. Heck, even the episodes of Courage about the snowman from the North Pole feel more on-the-nose holiday-themed with their usually snowy atmosphere and the times when we would see imagery such as the red and white striped North Pole. However, those episodes are metaphors for climate change, and other than the red and white pole gag, they aren't necessarily holiday-themed whatsoever. In contrast, though, this episode is dark, gritty, and it takes place in a literal dump. There isn't anything blatantly holiday-themed here except for the Nutcracker that Courage finds, and the plot, which loosely follows that of the Nutcracker Ballet, which is a traditional Christmas ballet. Except, well, instead of a little girl being gifted a nutcracker for Christmas and imagining it turning into a prince and fighting a rat king before taking her on an adventure in the land of sweets, it's about a family rummaging through junk at the dump as their dog befriends a mysterious nutcracker and uses his imagination to fight off a pair of human-hungry rats. It's just such a wild and insane plot that's so heavily removed from all traditional Christmas portrayals, and I love it so much for that. As a show that would typically go against the grain, this feels like the perfect Christmas episode. Sure, the actual story here may have been vastly different from your traditional telling of the Nutcracker, but regardless of that, they still effectively portrayed that same feeling of embracing the childlike wonder. This comes full swing in the way that Courage couldn't defeat the rats until he started participating in their dancing. He spends the entire episode panicked and running away, but when he actually embraces his imagination and lets the creativity flow through him, he's able to defeat the rats with the help of the Nutcracker. I do have to say though, I found it so clever how the rats used mostly traditional exterminator implements to attack Courage. We would see them utilizing sticky traps and mouse traps, which just really adds to that oddball feeling. It's a really strange comparison considering that we're talking about a children's show, but the fact that Courage the Cowardly Dog played so heavily into horror movie tropes, combined with its usual bizarre stories told, gritty art style, and the over-the-top storytelling, it would at times almost come across as the watered-down, kid-friendly cartoon version of a Grindhouse movie. To an extent. I mean, what other children's cartoons were having horror-themed Christmas episodes that took place in an old dump where rats are trying to boil you alive? The thing is, too, this was just a normal episode of Courage. This right here is just a day in the life of this poor dog. Now, moving in a bit of a different direction, I certainly want to talk about some metaphors that were subtly shown here, starting off with the ending. Specifically, we all saw how the Nutcracker ends up saving the day, and immediately he has his teeth destroyed by Eustace. After that happens, we see Courage holding on to it and looking sad, just to give it a big old broken teeth smile that resembles that of the Nutcracker. At first glance, this just seems like a silly gag and typical Courage behavior. But if you peel back the layers and look a little further, This just goes to show how no matter how broken someone may appear, they're still a hero in someone's story. Having a completely shattered set of teeth doesn't devalue the heroic efforts and accomplishments of neither this nutcracker nor Courage. Furthermore, it showcases how you never know when something or someone could play a huge part in the bigger picture. This right here ties directly into the next point that I want to discuss: Eustace and Muriel's different reactions to the nutcracker. Now, we saw Eustace greedily pick up the nutcracker, only to discard it seconds later, calling it a piece of garbage for not what he deems as a practical use. The fact that this thing helped Courage defeat the rats that were trying to eat him doesn't matter for a second to Eustace, because to him, unless it has a purpose to serve him, it's junk in his eyes. Meanwhile, Muriel has nothing but love and admiration for the nutcracker. She feels so much appreciation for it as she realizes that it's an antique with more meaningful than practical value. On a more broad level, this is an excellent metaphor for society and how many people can be divided into the glass half full optimistic type and the glass half empty pessimistic type. Furthermore, if we look at it a little deeper, not just considering the nutcracker as a piece of physical matter, but more representing the concept of art and creativity, considering that we literally saw Courage defeat these rats by dancing and pretending that the nutcracker was battling them, this can be an extremely bold social commentary on those who see art in the appreciation as well as the understanding of it as a waste of time, or even something that they can only find true value in if they can exploit it for their own financial gain. Meanwhile, there are those who could get lost for hours on end in not only the art itself, but also the rich culture from which the piece of art came. Speaking of the art, I have so much love for the amazing score to this episode. This episode would see pieces of the original score for the Nutcracker, written by Tchaikovsky, redone by Andy Ezrin and Jody Gray, the composers for all of the music throughout Courage the Cowardly Dog. It really sparks so much joy to realize how true to the original source material they were able to stay, all the meanwhile fleshing out a story that feels completely fresh and true to the nature of Courage as a show. On top of that, I really loved how clever it was how we found out that the background music we've been hearing all this time was actually coming from a physical gramophone, and it's implied that all of the characters were hearing it along with us this entire time as well. It's a really small and subtle thing, but something about it just adds so much value to the feeling that they're portraying here. If there's anything else that I want to touch on, it would be the two dancing rats that we saw playing the antagonist role in this episode. It was crazy to me how it seemed almost as if the rats were everywhere. They were in the hole Courage dug with the Nutcracker, they were in the fridge, the trunk of the car, they were just all over the place. This really just emphasizes to me how this scrapyard is their house. Courage and his family are in their stomping grounds, and these rats have tunnels everywhere. Not only that, but they've memorized the tunnels and are able to utilize them to stalk Courage and everyone else with ease. That just added so much to the suspense for me here, and it really is the small things like that which I can recall stressing me out so much when I would watch this as a kid. On the note of those rats though, anyone else get a good chuckle out of that moment where Courage was all out of breath and he stops to breathe while holding Muriel and the rats swap her for a bunch of tires? Now, I remember this moment, but I never really noticed how they actually made the stack of tires that they switched Muriel with look pretty close to how Muriel actually looks. This was just such a silly little gag, and it's one of those that I'm kind of surprised that I never noticed over the many times that I've seen this episode in the 20 plus years that it's been since it aired. But what do you guys think? Did this episode scream Christmas in your face? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, with all the love in the world, massive shout out to my friends over on Patreon, especially those of you in the true 90s kids tier. You guys are some of my absolute favorite people in the world. Thank you so much for being amazing, and never forget just how truly amazing you are, my friends. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and give a little praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this one to everyone else. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.